The question is, if rites and rituals are not encouraged in Buddhism, why do we organize and practice them? Because when we talk about Buddhism, always we mention this. Rites and rituals are not important for us to practice Buddhism. But we organize them and we practice them. Why? So what is your answer? So have you got anything to say? Do you think that those practices are very important for us to practice this religion? But before that, we had to define and analyze what are the rites and rituals. Then you can find out the answer. So how are we going to single out? Because we have various practices. In every religion, people practice certain rites and rituals in different forms. But the trouble is, while practicing our own rites and rituals, we try to ridicule and condemn others' practices. That is the wrong attitude. Now, Christians, Muslims, and some others also have their own rites and rituals. But when they talk about Buddhism and Hinduism, they try to ridicule our practices. That attitude is wrong. However, first and foremost, we must try to find out whether the Buddha advised or encouraged us to practice any kinds of rites and rituals. What is your answer? Can you say something? Yes or no? No answer. There is no place in his teaching where he has advised or encouraged us to practice any kinds of rites and rituals. Because his mission is entirely different. But there are many occasions where he pointed out the futility or uselessness of many kinds of rites and rituals and practices that which existed in India. Can we practice this religion without rites and rituals? All right. What are the basic principles or the essence of Buddhism? Then you can understand. Within 3 lines, the Buddha has explained the nature of Buddhism. What are those 3 lines? First one, avoid evil, do good, purify the mind, then where is the place for rites and rituals? But the trouble with us is we don't want to do that. And we do something else to satisfy our own desire or needs or ambitions. So we have been organizing, introducing, practicing various kinds of rites and rituals in the name of religion. There are very few who have learned, who have practiced the teachings of the Buddha. Try to keep away from many of those practices. To them, those practices are not important. They can lead a religious life. They can maintain peace and happiness without depending on rites and rituals. So what happened? Our cultural practices later we have converted into religious practices. So these are cultural practices. In India, there were thousands of such practices, and many of them were incorporated with this religion and started to practice as Buddhism, Buddhist practices. When this religion was introduced to other countries, like China, Japan, Korea, Mongolia, Tibet, they had their own cultural practices and traditional practices. So they have incorporated their own traditions. Later, they tried to introduce those practices as Chinese Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Korean Buddhism. There is no such thing that we can introduce as Japanese Buddhism or Chinese Buddhism or Indian Buddhism. Buddhism is Buddhism. So when we incorporated our own traditional practices, then we have given this label, Chinese Buddhism. Again, in certain other countries, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, they too had their own cultural practices. They tried to introduce Buddhism as Sri Lankan Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, and Burmese Buddhism. But no one can stop this, because they claim or they want to glorify that their own culture, their own tradition are more genuine. Because of this attitude, conflicts or the differences or discriminations take place. To avoid all these things, if we can directly concentrate on the Buddha's teaching, there won't be any problem. From time to time, let us take political upheavals, like cultural revolution in China and Tibet. They wanted to wipe out all those practices. And other religionists may come and attack and criticize and condemn and advise people to do away with all those practices. Those who depend on those practices think that they cannot practice Buddhism. Those practices are changeable, impermanent, because they were introduced, created by us. They are changeable. But there is nothing for us to change in Buddhism, in the Buddha's teaching. Now let us take only those three basic principles. Keep away from bad, evil, harmful, wicked, cruel, dangerous. There are so many things, irrespective of their different religious label or even without any religion. Is there anybody in this world who can say that our attitude is wrong? Everybody appreciates. When we try to keep away from killing and destroying and disturbing and bluffing and signaling and cheating and doing all sorts of evil, immoral practices, is there anybody who can say that we are wrong? That is Buddhism. Again, do good. We want to serve others. Do good means serve others. Don't be selfish. Try to contribute something within your knowledge, within your capacity to relieve others' sufferings, worries, and fear. This is called service. So when we are going to do some service to others, is there anybody who can say that we are wrong? That is Buddhism. Again, by knowing that our minds are not pure, although we try to keep away from bad things and do good things, still our minds are uncertain. Temptation can influence our mind to do bad thing again. Agitation influence our mind to be cruel and wicked. But we can do a lot of good things and we try to avoid evil things. That is why it is necessary for us to maintain a healthy mind. Healthy mind means by realizing our own weaknesses. We have our own weaknesses. We have terrible selfish desire. This selfishness again encourages us to do bad things. We have terrible jealousy for nothing. Although we won't gain anything, simply we harbor jealousy, cannot tolerate others' progress, development. And we have our own human emotion. This emotion we use in two ways. To indulge our emotions by providing more and more entertainment to satisfy our senses. We entertain our emotion. We like to see beautiful things. We like to hear nice music. And we like to eat very tasty food. So all the five senses need this kind of entertainment. But the trouble is, when we are going to entertain our five senses, we adopt a wrong method, wrong attitude, harmful method. The Buddha's advice is this. You can experience, you can entertain your senses, but in decent way, respectable way, not at the cost of others' life, without disturbing others, without hurting others, without misleading others. If you can indulge, there's no harm. Never goes against the Buddha's teaching. But how many people can do that? This is the way how we use our human emotion. Again, we have different type of emotions which we cannot find amongst the animals. We have sense of humor. Very seldom that we can find amongst the animals. We can joke and laugh and entertain others also. That is very important for our human mind. Otherwise, the mind can become very dull and very stubborn. To reduce that stubbornness or skeptical views in our mind, we must have some sort of harmless entertainment. The same emotion again disturbs us. When we cannot tolerate, then we adopt very violent, aggressive method. That is called anger. Then jealousy also follows. Emotion. Now you can understand where the weaknesses in our mind remain and how we can develop them, either to do harm or to entertain. Same emotion. So, introspection or awareness of the nature of our mental attitudes. Whether we are hot-tempered or greedy or selfish or jealous and emotional or temperamental, that understanding is very important. Again, there is another big problem. We have a very strong human egoism, egoistic, very stubborn, very strong mental force. Although we are wrong, not ready to admit, to accept that we are wrong. Try to justify by giving all sort of excuses or reasons. That is called human egoism. This egoism can hinder our spiritual development or the purity in our mind. We also use some other words for this. Prestige. We say we want to maintain our prestige, our name. If we are wrong, we have to admit. Then others appreciate it. Not only that, when you accept our own weakness or mistakes, we don't mislead others. We can say, yes, we know it is wrong. Somehow or the other, I had to do that. So I try my best not to repeat. Then we never mislead others. This is the advice given by the Buddha. Don't try to hide. But this is very difficult. Only person who can maintain that attitude is the Arahantas or the Buddhas. The meaning of Arahant means no secret. One who has no secret. We have a lot of secrets. Although we are good, we are religious, we are cultured, educated, but we have a lot of secrets. That means the egoism maintain this secret. Only after attaining that higher stage of Arahanthood, and no more secrets in that mind. But even then, there are few. By realizing this, try to subdue or to control this human egoism. So understanding of the nature of mind is the most important thing. We try to understand the whole world, the whole universe, and other galaxies, and the beginning of the world, end of the world, we try to realize. We had wonderful scientific knowledge. We know anthropology, how this human life was originated, but still, we do not know the nature of our own mind. Why? Because of that egoism. We always act as self-hypocrites. That is why the Buddha says, try to maintain healthy mind or the purity in your mind. Of course, that is the last item. This is Buddhism. Now, where is the place for us to perform rites and rituals and ceremonies and spend so much of money for burning this and celebrations and many other things? To keep away from evil things, no ceremonies, isn't it? To do good also, of course, sometimes you organize nicely, no harm, but without any ceremony, you can do a lot of good things. To maintain purity in your mind, to reduce the evil forces from your mind, not necessary to have any ceremonies, any what you call initiation ceremony. Because some people still believe that after receiving some sort of initiation from another teacher or guru or this or that, they may gain some sort of purity. That is only a belief. The Buddha did not encourage this. This I noticed very carefully a few years ago when Dalai Lama visited here, this temple, and he shook hands with few people who were there in front. Others had no chance to shake hands with him. After that, some of our devotees would then touch others' hand to get the blessing directly from this man. They believe by touching his hand, that man got some sort of power and purity. After that, he goes there and touches that man's hand to get the blessing. These things, these practices were very common in India. Still they practice this, initiation. There is no such thing as initiation, baptizing. These are the only three things. This is Buddhism. To do good is not very difficult. Everybody is doing some service to others. But not to do bad thing is very, very difficult. You can understand. Very difficult to control. Who is responsible for all these things? Our own minds. That is why it is necessary for us to maintain healthy mind. Not so easy for us to maintain purity at once. It is a gradual development, step by step. We had to drop one by one. That is why we cannot climb up, because too heavy. Our weight we cannot carry because of those evil forces. So when we drop one by one, then we can climb very easily. These are the stages: Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami, Arahanta, if not Buddha. To climb this ladder, we had to reduce so many tons of our evil forces from the mind. Then become lighter. Then we can climb to the second stage. Again there we had to drop two more lighter. Again easily we can climb the third one. After climbing there, still we carry 5 more. So when we drop all these 5 more evil forces from the mind, then we will be on the top. That is called sainthood or arahanta. After that, free from all these burdens. That is what the Buddha says. First advice, after giving Dhammacakka Sutra, the sermon, the first sermon, and there were 60 arahantas attained sainthood. Then he said, Muttohang sabba pasehi ye dibba ye cha manusa tumhehi mutta pasehi ye dibba ye cha manusa. Muttohang sabba pase. Now I am free from all those burdens and responsibilities and bondages, things. Tumhehi mutta pase. And you are also free from all the bondages and fetters and disturbances. Ye dibba, ye cha manusa. There are 2 kinds of bondages and fetters and disturbances. One is human bondages. That means, as human beings, we have so many worries and miseries and responsibilities and commitments which disturb our mind as human beings. But you and I are free because we have no more such burdens in our mind. Ye dibba. Dibba means divine. This is the difference between Buddhism and all the other existing religions. All the other religions try to develop attachment towards the divine power, divinity. That is why always go and worship and pray and do some offering. There's a link they develop, thinking that they can get some sort of blessings or relief through the influence of divine power. Here the Buddha says, now we are free from even that bondage, because that divinity or that divine power has nothing to do with us. Completely cut off from all the worldly bondages. Those who want to exist in this world, life after life, need this kind of blessing from the divinity. But our aim is not to exist while suffering and worrying and crying and fighting, but to get rid of this. For that divinity or divine power has nothing to do, because we won't get this from them. At the same time, he also mentioned in various other discourses, for your worldly life, you need good health, long life, good food, and peaceful life, and you want to avoid misfortunes, accidents. For such worldly things, worldly problem, yes, you may gain some sort of help from those existing devas. But all these are worldly things, temporary, for a short period. You may get little bit of relief, but that is not the permanent cure. Again you have to start. The same suffering, same sickness and same problem. Now you can see the difference. When we completely cut off from all these bondages, and those problems and difficulties and worries never come back. Now this is Buddhism. So, our subject is rites and rituals are not encouraged by the Buddha, it is true. Then why do we organize? Just now I mentioned all these practices are our cultural practices. Later, we try to imbue certain religious significance, and then introduce as religious practice. There is a misunderstanding. Certain religious traditional practices that we maintain, we have been maintained for thousands of years, where we can point out religious significance, if not divert or transformed as religious practices. So they are not under this category, rites and rituals. Now we have to differentiate now. To attain the first stage of sainthood, Sotapanna, we had to eradicate three kinds of mental defilements. One of them is this: Silabbata Paramasa. There are three words there: Sila, Vata, Paramasa. Attachments towards many of those beliefs and practices, thinking that they can gain their final salvation or moksha or nirvana or paradise through the influence of these practices. These are the rites and rituals. The Buddha did not encourage. He pointed out this is some sort of hindrance for our spiritual development. Don't develop your attachment towards these practices thinking that you can go to heaven, you can attain nirvana through these practices. That is the wrong attitude. You know, even today, not only in those days, even today when you visit India, you can see there are hundreds of different religious cult denominations in India. They have their own method. But Hindu philosophy or the doctrine, the basic teachings are very close to the Buddha's teaching. But many of those genuine teachings eclipse, overshadowed through those practices. So people can see only those practices. So Buddhists also follow them. They have learned all these practices from them. But when the Buddha was there, his followers did not perform all these rites and rituals which we practice today. They try to be good, practice charity, observe sila or morality, and develop more patience and understanding, and try to lead harmless and respectable life, and cultivate their mind through meditation. These are the practices they had. But we could not satisfy with all these practices. To satisfy our craving, our ambitions, anxieties, we invited many of those practices and went on developing and developing and developing, are still going on developing. So today, Buddhism is a concoction of all those beliefs and practices. The most unfortunate situation is different schools of Buddhism and those teachers who come from different countries try to introduce different method, different belief, different practices, and give different ideologies and beliefs. And these innocent people cannot understand what Buddhism is. So you are at crossroad today. You cannot understand which method is correct. So they are doing a lot of damages to innocent Buddhists, misleading them. Some of them are doing all those things for their own benefit, personal benefit. So the best advice that I can give you is this. You should not depend on any of those rites and rituals. If there is anything very important, very reasonable, respectable, you can practice. But don't try to follow all those things what others come and preach and ask you to do. Later you create more confusion. You may lose faith in Buddhism. Try to learn what the Buddha taught. That is enough for you. Now let us take certain things that we practice here. Offerings, oil lamps, candles, offering flowers, incense, fruits, and worshipping, kneel down and recite certain verses. To many others, all these things are rites and rituals. Now Westerners also learning Buddhism, because they have never seen any of these practices. They say they can practice Buddhism without performing any kind of rites and rituals. We cannot say they are wrong. We have no ground to say they are wrong. But there is something very important thing that they have not realized. We have to consider. Many of them are intellectuals who have studied languages, science, philosophy, or so many techniques, technologies. So they can use their sense of reasoning and understanding to analyze. So they know how to appreciate the teachings of the Buddha. What about others? And what are we going to contribute to those who cannot understand, who cannot think deeply, who have developed only their faith and devotion? What are we going to do with them? When we ask them to reason out, they ask, what do you mean by reasoning out? There is nothing for them to reason out. Because they need something to develop their devotion. Then they develop their confidence. They will continue. And they teach the same method to their children and grandchildren. If we talk only about philosophy or psychology or meditation, 1 or 2 generations in that particular family maintain this, after that completely lost. Now assume you are interested only in meditation and meditations. After her death, and all the other members also slowly dispersed. Now, no active Buddhist in France. There are few isolated cases here and there. The main reason is, when you organize something as religious festival, you invite hundreds and thousands of others to come and participate, join and cooperate with you. Then there will be some sort of harmony, cooperation and unity, friendship. These things support to maintain all the activities. Now let us take this temple. Only after you are coming to this temple, you came to know so many members, not only Chinese and Chinese, Chinese and Sinhalese, Chinese and Indians, and Chinese and Europeans, you came to know each other. Then you also developed some sort of friendship and understanding. Again, when we harmonize something that we organize, there is a strength. The basic teachings of the Buddha is for us to practice individually. The basic teachings of the Buddha is for us to practice individually. Now you try to be good. You try to do good. You try to purify your own mind. Yes, you have to do that because nobody else can do that for you. But that is not enough. So when you compare Buddhist community with others, take Christians, Muslims, and Hindus also just like Buddhists, not very far away from the same brand. The unity and understanding amongst their group, the followers of that particular religion, is more healthy and more advanced than among the Buddhists and Hindus. Because we do not consider this very seriously. But they always try to develop their friendship, relationship, understanding, helping each other. When they are in trouble, they go and help. When they are sick, they go and help. When there is a death, they go and help them. Then they develop their understanding, link. This moral support is very important for us. Then you feel. So when we are in trouble, we have our Buddhist friends, our members, who are willing to give us helping hand. That is very important to develop our confidence. That is why these ceremonies and on such and such day we are going to give dana. Do you like to come and join with us? And then they too feel happy. And they also ask, can we contribute something? You don't ask, but they voluntarily they come and contribute something. Then say about 20 to 30 people from different families assemble, meet, talk to each other, then develop understanding, friendship. This is very important. So those people in Europe cannot understand this attitude. Their way of life is not like ours. If you visit their house without informing them, they never open their doors. If you force them to open the door, they open, sit down and talk. They never give you a cup of tea because you did not inform them earlier that you will be coming. If not earlier, you have to tell them, I will be coming such and such time, I also like to have a cup of tea. Otherwise they will never give. I can tell you what happened to me when I went to England. As a life member of our Buddhist Missionary Society in London, he always writes to us very nice letter how he became a Buddhist, and a lot of correspondence, we exchange. So I got his address and I thought he will be very happy to see me when I was there. So I could manage to find out his telephone number from London Buddhist Vihara and telephoned, I am here, I like to meet you. Then he asked, is there anything very important for you to see me? Can you imagine their mentality? We cannot blame them. This is their way of life. So, to them, these kind of rites and rituals and ceremonies are not important. But we should not follow them blindly. We had to maintain our noble tradition. We have noble, respectable, reasonable, traditional, cultural practices which contribute so many things for us to maintain healthy community, to gain moral support and maintain our confidence. Not only religious values or the spiritual development, we need so many other support from here and there. Again, the practices, offering of light, what do you recite? I offer this light to wipe out the darkness, illuminate the whole place. This is a sacred place for thousands of devotees come and practice religion. And then you divert this again into meditation. I offer this light in the name of the Buddha to illuminate this place, who dispel the darkness of ignorance. So may I get the same ability to develop my mind, to get rid of my ignorance. It is a meditation. See the religious significance there in this practice, offering of light. So who can say it is useless rite and ritual? We offer flowers in appreciations of many things. We offer flowers. Everybody in this world like flowers. That is the highest respect that we can express by offering flowers. So we offer these flowers at the feet of this holy, enlightened religious teacher in appreciations of his highest achievement as a token. Is it meaningful or not? Not only that, again, divert towards meditation. Now these flowers are very lovely, beautiful, nice, fragrant. You can experience. But this beauty, this nice smell won't last long. After 1 or 2 days' time, we can see all these beautiful flowers and petals fade away, dry, drop. no more fragrance you can experience. But this beauty, this nice smell won't last long. After 1 or 2 days' time, you can see all these beautiful flowers and petals fade away, dry, drop, no more fragrance. The body that I value so much, so precious thing to me, also just like this flower. One day, the beauty, complexion, everything fade away and collapse, concentrate, impermanency of every existing things in this world. Is it meaningful or not? Again, we offer something, either fruits or food. Then people ask, why do you want to offer these things? This is a statue, this is an idol, this is image. Do you think this image can eat all those things? They cannot understand the meaning. We allocate certain amount of our income or our food in the name of the Buddha. Whether the Buddha eat or not, this is our contribution. Then, when we practice this, encourage others also to do this, we train them to practice charity, at least give something for the benefit of others. We train them. Why? The Buddha advised the monks, go out with your begging bowl, house to house. Whether they give or not, you must visit every house in that area. You cannot choose certain houses. Sappadanang pindapatam. That means you cannot choose houses. What is the idea? I understand recently a Catholic priest was giving a talk, Sunday sermon. In his sermons he mentioned this. The Buddhist monks are not beggars. They do not go for begging their food. They visit houses to remind, to encourage people to practice charity. Then slowly they learn. So we must appreciate. We should not condemn them as beggars. When the Buddha visited his palace first time after his enlightenment, his father, King Suddhodana, prepared food for 500 monks, his followers, and the Buddha. The Buddha did not go to royal palace. He visited with his begging bowl various other poor people's houses. Then people came and reported, look at your son, a prince, begging food like a beggar. He disgraced your royal family. The king could not tolerate. He went to the Buddha, told him, please don't disgrace my royal family. Then the Buddha asked, what do you mean by that? You are my son. You are a prince. You disgrace my royal family begging food like this. Then the Buddha said, you must understand, I am not belong to your royal family. I
and belong to the Buddha's family. I am following the Buddha's tradition. This is the Buddha's tradition. Then the king realized. What is the idea? To encourage people. So the king had no difficulty to feed 500 monks and the Buddha. So people cannot understand. Some people ask, why do these monks depend on others? Why can't they go out and work? Why can't they find out their own food? First thing, when they go out, started to work, they develop all their craving and attachment and responsibilities and commitments and so many things, and we have got time to practice religion and meditations and to do some service to others. That's why they renounce everything and they do their religious work, and the devotees, by realizing this, they come and attend to them. Because they also believe it is a meritorious deed when you support religious people, because they are leading a noble life, they are also doing some service to others, they are not selfish. This is the religious custom. So, we must know how to analyze these practices. So, the food, again, that we offer, we never throw away. There are so many people, beggars, animals, and we distribute amongst all those people for them to enjoy this food. First we offer in the name of the Buddha, and later we do not throw away this food. Again we can feed others. Otherwise these people never give anything. So poor people also get the chance to eat something, some good food, because of this. This is the way how to encourage people to practice charity. When the Buddha visited Agnika Bharadwaja Brahmana, a Brahmana who performed rites and rituals, sacrifice, fire. That was very famous religious practice in India. They collect all sort of firewoods and rice and grains and ghee and butter, everything, and burn and burn and burn and pray to God. And the Buddha completely condemned this kind of rites and ritual. No meaning at all. So when he was performing this, the Buddha visited his house with his begging bowl. When he saw the Buddha, he got angry and scolded him. Using very dirty words to humiliate him. He used the word low caste, vasala, to the Buddha. He said, don't come, vasala, who belong to a low caste. Then the Buddha knew, this is the time for him to dialogue with him. Then he asked Brahmana, do you know the real meaning of vasala or the low caste? And now he could not answer. Then the Buddha gave a long sermon. When you read Vasala Sutra in Paritta chanting book, you can see what the Buddha said. One thing he said, Yo brahmanang va samanang va bhattakale upatite roseti vacha natadeti. Look at it. Whenever a religious man comes to a person's house during the Makan time, that person scold that religious man without giving him anything, he is the loka, belong to low caste man, not the person who come and ask the food. Then the Brahmin realized. After that he became the follower of the Buddha. Later he became a monk and arahant. See the Buddha's attitude. How he encouraged people. Again, Alavaka, cannibal, who lived on the human flesh. Even the kings also did not want to go there, scared of it. The Buddha went alone. That day he did not ask even any of his disciples to follow him. He went alone. And he had a big battle with him. He stood like a giant in front of this cannibal. And a lot of arguments, challenges, threatened him. Then the Buddha said, you try. Finally he surrendered. Then he preached the Dhamma. He asked certain questions, answered, became the follower. And later, he has become one of the best disciples of the Buddha. There are few discourses which is called Hatha Alavaka Sutra, where the Buddha praised Alavaka. He said, amongst all the lay disciples, Alavaka is the most devout, who has more devotion towards the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. See how the Buddha can change the mentality of such cruel people to become a holy man. So the rites and rituals that we practice here are not the rites and rituals that the Buddha condemned or discarded. And sacrifices, animal sacrifices, rites and rituals, and taking certain vows to torture our physical body, condemned by the Buddha, under rites and rituals, without eating. Still there are many belong to one particular religious group called Jainism, Jaina religion. There are, I think, about 8 million followers still in India. And they strongly believe that if they can die starving without taking food, they can wash away all their sins they have committed during their lifetime. And after that, they can find out their final salvation. And the Buddha condemned this kind of belief and practices. He never encouraged anybody to suffer in the name of religion, to be religious, not necessary to torture your physical body. You can take your normal food, but you must know where are the weaknesses. Because physical body is not responsible for our mistakes, for our sins. Mind creates all these things. So by torturing your body, you cannot purify the mind. Now if you want to torture, you must torture your mind, not the body. And then, how to torture the mind? When you are very angry, don't allow this anger to flare up. Control. That is the way how to torture your mind. When you are jealous, think, why should I develop this jealousy? Very bad, very dirty, very ugly. Withdraw that. Don't allow that mind to develop. This is the way how to torture the mind. See whether meaningful or not. When you are very selfish, that you don't want to give anything for the benefit of others, then think, hey, don't be so silly. At least contribute something for the benefit of others. Reduce your selfishness, torture your mind. This is the Buddhist technique. Then there are many others who burn. But still, the Buddhists also have learned from them. Burning here, burning there, thinking that they can get rid of their sins they have committed. The Buddha said no. Again, some others observe complete silence without talking. Never talk anything. They believe when they observe this, all the bad things they have done by using their mouth can be washed away. Namone muni hoti. Here the Buddha says, mona means silence, without talking. A person cannot become a holy man just because he keeps quiet, without talking. The Buddha he was actually a revolutionized, very respectable and reasonable way, how he pointed out the futility of those practices and beliefs. So, all these are under rites and rituals. So as Buddhists, we do not practice, we do not encourage. That is why Buddhism is known as middle path. You know the real meaning of middle path. Just now I mentioned, you can experience worldly pleasures, you can indulge your five senses very respectable, reasonable, harmless way. That is the middle path for enjoyment. On the other hand, you should not go to extreme to suffer. Or according to our religion, we cannot eat this. According to our religion, we cannot use this. According to our religion, we cannot all these things that people believe. There is no such thing in Buddhism. No reason for you to suffer. Lead a normal life. That is called middle path. This is Dr. Rhys David, the founder of Pali Text Society, who translated most of those Pali Tripitaka books into English, says, I have read, I have learned all the existing religions in this world, but I could not find out this Eight Noble Path as middle path in any other religion. That is what the Buddha said earlier. When many people came and asked this question, there are many religions, we do not know which religion is the correct religion. Can you please advise us? Then, in simple language, he said, so whenever you can find eight noble paths in any religion, accept that religion as correct religion. This is called middle path. So what is the time now? Because this one, forever, And next Friday, I don't know whether I'll be here. Tomorrow going to Singapore. Yesterday came back from Kuantan, and I'm like a satellite now, you know. Also good one. What is the Buddhist concept of punishment and reward of God? This is a very common belief. God punishes us, God rewards us. What is the Buddhist attitude? Very interesting.